Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going right into a really crucial question about World War I.
hmm
Why did the fighting in those first few years become such a long and just incredibly deadly stalemate?
Yeah,
We're not talking about who won or lost today, but really focusing on why neither side could, gain a clear upper hand early on.
right. Which led to those years of brutal trench warfare.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Okay, so our goal here is to break down the key factors that, well, led to this deadlock.
hmm
We want everyone listening to come away with a clear understanding of why things got stuck this way, without getting bogged down in every single detail.
Makes sense.
Okay, let's start by getting a handle on some of the main players and ideas involved. First off, who exactly were the Central Powers?
Okay, so the Central Powers were primarily Germany and Austria-Hungary.
Right.
You can picture them geographically, sort of sitting right there in the middle of Europe, hence the name Central.
Okay.
And the central location was actually a really important factor strategically, created both, well, challenges and opportunities for them.
Right. And thinking about their initial plan, Germany's Schlieffen Plan is, well, it's huge, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Can you explain what that was all about?
Yeah, the Schlieffen Plan was Germany's big military strategy right at the start of the war.
Okay.
The main idea was basically to quickly defeat France in the West
Uh-huh.
before Russia in the East could really get its act together and fully mobilize its forces.
So speed was key.
Absolutely. The whole plan relied heavily on speed and efficiency.
Hmm.
The German military leaders, they assumed that Russia would take a long time to get its army ready.
Right, giving them a window.
Exactly, giving them that window to knock France out of the war first.
So it was like trying to solve a problem on two fronts by dealing with one really, really fast.
Pretty much.
What were some of the key things they were counting on for that to work? The assumptions, I guess.
Well, there were a few really critical assumptions. Like we said, the speed of Russian mobilization was a big one.
Uh-huh.
They seriously underestimated how quickly Russia could actually get its troops ready.
Right.
Another was the level of resistance they expected as they moved through Belgium to get to France.
They thought that'd be easy.
Relatively easy, yeah.
Hmm.
They didn't expect the fight they got, and overall speed was just absolutely crucial.
Right.
Any delays in the West could throw off the entire, carefully planned timetable. This reliance on such rigid timing was actually a critical weakness in the plan itself.
That makes sense. So, okay, on the other side, we have the Allies. Who were the main countries in that group at the beginning?
Right, the Allies. The major players on the Allied side early in the war were primarily France, Britain, and Russia. And if you look at a map, you can see how they kind of surrounded the Central Powers.
Yeah, geographically spread out.
Exactly, which created a really complex strategic situation for everyone involved.
And the place where a lot of the initial fighting happened and where this stalemate really took hold, that was the Western Front. Where exactly was that?
So the Western Front was the main area of fighting in Western Europe. It stretched across a long distance, mainly through France and Belgium.
Okay.
This is where the majority of the fighting between the German forces and the French and British armies took place.
Right.
And it's where the stalemate became most, deeply entrenched.
Okay, so imagine this long line of conflict stretching across Western Europe. Now, what made the fighting there so unique and so incredibly difficult to break through?
Yeah.
That leads us to trench warfare, right?
Exactly. Trench warfare became, the defining characteristic of the Western Front.
What was that all about?
Well, it involved both sides digging these massive networks of long, interconnected channels in the ground.
Just ditches.
Well, not just simple ditches. They evolved into really complex systems.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple lines of trenches, communication trenches to move between them safely, dugouts for shelter. These systems could stretch for miles and miles.
Wow. So they offered protection, but I can't imagine it was a pleasant experience living in them.
Pleasant. Absolutely not. The conditions inside the trenches were often truly awful.
Like what?
Think constant mud, especially when it rained, which was a lot.
Right.
Disease spread incredibly quickly, poor sanitation, close living conditions. Plus, soldiers were under constant threat from enemy fire artillery shells raining down, snipers.
Right.
And the psychological toll, living with that constant fear and the grim surroundings, it was immense.
And then in between these opposing lines of trenches, there was this really terrifying area known as no man's land.
Yeah.
What was that like?
No man's land was, it was the strip of ground separating the front lines of the two opposing armies. It was desolate, Unbelievably dangerous. The ground usually completely torn up by artillery fire,
Yeah.
often covered in barbed wire to slow down attackers, and totally exposed to enemy machine guns and other weapons.
Trying to cross it.
Any soldier who tried to cross no man's land faced an almost certain risk of being killed or severely wounded. It was basically a death trap.
Wow. So you've got these heavily defended lines with this deadly zone in between. And all of this was happening in an era of what we call modern warfare.
Mm-hmm.
What did that actually mean in the context of World War I?
Well, what we mean by modern warfare in World War I really comes down to the impact of new and powerful technologies on the battlefield.
Oh,
Think about the machine gun, for example.
okay.
Unlike older rifles, machine guns could fire hundreds of bullets per minute,
Right.
making it incredibly dangerous for large groups of soldiers to advance across open ground.
Yeah, I can see that.
Then you had high-powered artillery that could bombard enemy positions from miles away, causing massive destruction before an attack even began.
So softening them up, supposedly.
Supposedly. And then you had things like barbed wire, which created these deadly obstacles that slowed attackers down.
Funneling them.
Exactly, channeling them into areas where they could be easily targeted by machine guns.
So those technologies fundamentally shifted the advantage to the defense.
Hugely. It wasn't just about having new gadgets. It was how these technologies combined to make those traditional attacking tactics incredibly difficult and, well, incredibly deadly.
Okay, so let's circle back to the Schlieffen Plan now. Now that we have this picture of modern warfare and trench lines in our minds, why did that initial German strategy ultimately fail?
Right, so the Schlieffen Plan ran into several really significant problems pretty quickly.
Like the Belgians.
Exactly. First off, the Belgian army put up much stronger, more determined resistance than the German military leaders had anticipated.
Okay.
This unexpected fight slowed down the German advance into France, throwing off that crucial timeline.
And the Russians.
That was a second big thing. Russia mobilized its forces much faster than the German planners had predicted.
So the assumption was wrong again.
Completely wrong. And this meant Germany had to pull troops away from the critical Western Front.
Weakening the main push.
Precisely. Send them east much earlier in the war, weakening their initial attack in the west. It really highlights a key flaw in their planning, underestimating their opponent's capabilities.
So those two key assumptions about Belgian resistance and Russian mobilization were just wrong. Were there other factors too?
Oh, absolutely. The French and British forces also launched effective counterattacks,
Okay.
most notably at the First Battle of the Marne. That was September 1914. This battle stopped the German advance just short of Paris.
A crucial moment.
Very crucial. And finally, there was just the sheer logistical challenge.
Supplying the troops.
Yeah, trying to maintain the incredibly fast pace the Schlieffen Plan required. Supplying and moving such a massive army so quickly across that kind of distance presented huge difficulties. That contributed to the slowdown and ultimately the plan's failure to achieve its initial goals.
Okay, so the quick knockout blow in the West just didn't happen. Now, how did this initial, more mobile fighting then turn into those fixed trench lines we talked about?
Yeah.
How did the Western Front become so well entrenched?
Well, after those initial attacks failed to deliver a decisive victory for either side, both the Allies and the Central Powers realized they needed to dig in for protection.
Because of the weapons.
Because of the sheer killing power of those modern weapons we discussed, especially machine guns and artillery.
Right.
It meant that any large-scale attacks across open ground resulted in absolutely horrific casualties.
With very little game.
Very little to no ground gain, exactly. It became obvious that attacking was just too costly and often amounted to suicide.
So the defense had a massive advantage because of the technology.
A huge advantage. And because neither side could effectively break through the other's lines, they started what's often called the race to the sea.
What is that?
Each army tried to outflank the other, basically, to extend their own lines further and further north.
Trying to get around the end.
Right, trying to get around the enemies and gain an advantage. But the other side would just extend their line to match.
So they just kept extending outwards.
Yeah, this eventually led to a continuous, unbroken line of trenches stretching all the way from the English Channel down to Switzerland.
Right.
The front essentially became one long, solid, static barrier that was incredibly difficult to penetrate.
A truly massive and almost unmovable line. So once they were in these trenches, what was the actual fighting like and how did that contribute to the ongoing stalemate?
Well, life and death in the trenches, it heavily favored the defending side. A well-prepared system of trenches offered significant protection against attack. Machine gunners, artillery crews, positioned in these entrenched positions, they could inflict devastating losses on any attacking force trying to cross that open ground of no man's land.
Just so attacks were just incredibly costly.
Incredibly costly in terms of human lives, and yet they very rarely resulted in any significant territorial gains. It became this brutal cycle.
It's just back and forth.
Bloody attacks followed by equally bloody failures, with neither side able to make a real breakthrough. It wasn't just a physical deadlock. It represented a fundamental failure of offensive military thinking in the face of this industrial-scale defensive power.
So it was constant pounding with very little movement. What about new technologies? Surely new advancements could have helped break this stalemate. Tanks, maybe?
Well, yes and no. While military technology was certainly advanced for the time, it didn't immediately offer a clear way to overcome the stalemate in those early years. New technologies that would later become important, like tanks and poison gas, they were still in the very early stages of development.
Still figuring them out.
Exactly. How to use them effectively on a large scale wasn't yet understood. They hadn't been properly integrated into offensive strategies in a way that could really overcome the defensive power of the trenches and the existing modern weaponry.
So it took time.
It would take time and further development for those technologies to potentially shift the balance. But early on, not so much.
So it was this really terrible combination then. Initial strategic failures, the overwhelming power of defensive technologies, and the brutal nature of trench warfare itself that just locked both sides into this devastating deadlock.
Precisely. The combination of the failure of the Schlieffen Plan, the surprisingly effective early resistance, the dominance of modern defensive weapons, and the static nature of trench warfare on the Western Front. It created a situation where neither the Central Powers nor the Allies could effectively advance. This is what led directly to the prolonged and incredibly bloody stalemate that defined the early years of World War I.
So to quickly sum up then, this early stalemate wasn't just one simple thing, was it?
Not at all.
It was this unfortunate coming together of Germany's risky Schlieffen Plan and its miscalculations,
Right.
the unexpectedly strong defense and quick mobilization of the Allied forces, and then the sheer power of those new defensive technologies like machine guns, forcing everyone into the brutal and unyielding world of trench warfare.
It was a recipe for deadlock.
Yeah, a recipe for a deadlock on a truly massive and tragic scale. The initial hopes for a short, decisive war just vanished, didn't
They
they?
evaporated, replaced by years of unimaginable suffering and attrition. The stalemate wasn't just a physical deadlock, it forced a brutal reevaluation of how wars would be fought in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
What's fascinating, or perhaps grimly fascinating, is how quickly those initial expectations of a fluid, fast-moving conflict just gave way to this static, exceptionally bloody form of warfare.
And neither side really had an answer.
Neither side really had a good answer in those early years to overcome the other's defenses.
It really does paint a grim picture. Considering that initial belief in a short war, it makes you really think how this long stalemate and those unbelievable casualty numbers must have affected morale.
Oh, hugely.
The morale of the soldiers, the long-term plans of all the countries involved. It's a stark reminder, isn't it? How unexpected events and the harsh realities of modern conflict can completely change the course of history in ways no one can predict.
Absolutely. Something really important to think about. The shift from expecting a swift victory to enduring years of this entrenched warfare had profound effects on society, politics, and, well, the way people viewed the world.
Yeah.
It forced nations to adapt and find new ways to fight, new ways to keep going, even when faced with just unimaginable losses.
Okay. Now, to help everyone listening really solidify their understanding of this deep dive into the early stalemate of World War I, here are just a few questions to think about on your own.
Good idea.
First, what were the main goals of Germany's Schlieffen Plan, and why did it ultimately fail? Second, how did new technologies like the machine gun contribute to the stalemate on the Western Front? Third, describe the key characteristics of trench warfare and explain why it made large-scale offensives so difficult. Fourth, what does the term no man's land refer to, and what dangers did it present to soldiers?
And maybe one more.
Oh, good one.
Yeah.
Fifth, can you name the main countries that made up the Central Powers and the Allies at the beginning of World War I?
Right.
Thinking through these questions should help you check your understanding of the key factors that led to that deadlock in the early years of the war.
Definitely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.